If you are 62 or older, there is a new Social Security rule that was just announced, and it will start affecting people in March of 2026. This is not a rumor. It is not speculation. And it is not something far off in the future. This change is already written into policy, and retirees are slowly starting to hear about it. But many people still don't understand what it really means. Some headlines make it sound terrifying. Others barely explain it at all. So today we're going to slow this down and talk through it clearly. No panic, no scare tactics, just what changed, who it affects, and why people over 62 need to pay attention before March 2026 arrives. Let's start with one very important clarification. This is not an automatic benefit cut that hits everyone at once. Your Social Security check does not suddenly disappear in March, but this change does affect how benefits are calculated, adjusted, and protected, especially for people who claim early or plan to claim soon. That's why people aged 62 and up are being told to take notice. Now let's talk about why March 2026 matters. March is when several administrative updates take effect at the same time. These updates change how Social Security applies existing rules, not brand new laws, but how current laws are enforced. That distinction matters, because enforcement changes often feel like benefit cuts, even when the law itself didn't change. Now let's talk about what Social Security is trying to do. The system is under pressure. More retirees, fewer workers, longer life expectancy, and higher benefit payouts. So instead of cutting benefits outright, the agency is tightening how rules are applied. This is happening quietly, and mostly through internal rule changes. That's why many retirees feel blindsided. Now let's talk about the group most affected, people who claim at 62, people who are between 62 and full retirement age, and people who plan to file within the next 2 years. These are the retirees most sensitive to rule changes, because their benefits are still adjustable. Once you reach full retirement age, many rules lock in. Before that, adjustments happen more often. Now let's talk about one of the biggest misunderstandings. Many people think once they start Social Security, nothing can change. That's not true. Before full retirement age, benefits can be adjusted for earnings timing, work status, reporting accuracy, and enforcement reviews. The March 2026 changes increase how strictly some of these are applied. Now let's talk about the phrase you're seeing everywhere: benefits cut coming. This wording is misleading. What's really happening is reduced protection against reductions in certain situations. That's very different from a blanket cut. But it still matters, because retirees who don't understand the rules may lose money without realizing why. Now let's talk about early claiming at 62. Claiming early already comes with permanent reductions. That hasn't changed. What has changed is how Social Security verifies eligibility, earnings, and reporting for early claimers. The margin for error is shrinking. Mistakes that used to be corrected quietly are now being enforced more aggressively. Now let's slow this down. If you are over 62 and already receiving benefits, this does not mean you did something wrong. It means you need to understand how the system will behave going forward. Now let's talk about earnings rules. If you claim before full retirement age and continue working, there is an earnings limit. That limit already existed. What changes in March 2026 is how quickly Social Security reacts when the limit is crossed. In the past, overpayments were often corrected later. Going forward, benefits are more likely to be withheld sooner. That feels like a cut, but technically, it's enforcement. Now let's talk about reporting. Social Security relies heavily on self-reporting, especially for people under full retirement age. Work status, income changes, life changes. Starting in 2026, delayed reporting is treated more strictly. That means waiting too long to report changes can cost you benefits temporarily. Now let's pause here. If this sounds overwhelming, don't worry. Most people are not in danger, but people who don't understand the rules are the ones who get hurt. Now let's keep going, because we still need to talk about why retirees are being warned now, what acting before March 2026 actually means, and how to protect your benefits without panic. Now let's talk about why retirees are being warned now, even though March 2026 is still months away. Social Security rules don't flip like a switch. They roll in quietly. Training changes first, internal systems update next, then enforcement slowly tightens. By the time the public fully notices, money has already been affected. That's why people who understand the changes early are in a better position. They don't rush, they don't panic, they simply avoid mistakes. Now let's talk about what Act Before March 2026 actually means. It does not mean filing early just to beat a deadline. It does not mean changing benefits blindly. And it does not mean Social Security will stop checks in March. What it means is this. If you are between 62 and full retirement age, the way Social Security responds to changes in your situation is becoming less forgiving. Timing matters more. Reporting matters more. Accuracy matters more. Now let's talk about one of the biggest areas where retirees lose money without realizing it. Delayed earnings reporting. Many people who claim early keep working. That's common. What's changing is how Social Security responds when earnings go higher than expected. In the past, Social Security often waited until the next year to correct things. They would send an overpayment letter. You would pay it back slowly. Starting in 2026, benefits are more likely to be adjusted in real time. That means checks can be reduced or paused sooner. This feels sudden to retirees. But from Social Security's perspective, it's enforcement catching up. Now let's talk about another area. Temporary work, seasonal work, short-term contracts. Many retirees take these without thinking much about reporting. Under the new rules, short-term income still counts. And delayed reporting is more likely to trigger benefit holds. Again, not punishment, just stricter application. Now let's talk about something else that scares people. Reviews. More retirees between 62 and full retirement age will see reviews. These are not audits. They are routine checks. But they can feel intimidating if you don't know what's happening. Most reviews end quickly. But if information is missing or late, benefits can be paused while things are clarified. That pause feels like a cut, but it's temporary. Now let's talk about people who already started benefits at 62. This does not mean you made a bad decision. Early claiming is still valid, but it means you need to be more careful going forward, especially if you are still working. Your income changes, your living situation changes, or your marital status changes. These things always mattered. They just matter more now. Now let's talk about something retirees often overlook. Social Security uses estimates. When you claim early and say how much you expect to earn, that estimate matters. If actual earnings end up much higher, enforcement is faster under the new rules. Updating estimates promptly becomes more important. Now let's slow this down. Nothing here means retirees are under attack. Nothing here means benefits are being eliminated. What's happening is precision. The system is tightening around the rules that already existed. Now let's keep going, because there's another group that needs to pay attention. And that's people who are thinking about claiming at 62 but haven't yet. Now let's talk directly to people who are thinking about claiming Social Security at 62 but haven't done it yet. This group has more flexibility than anyone else right now. And that flexibility matters more with the March 2026 changes coming. Claiming at 62 has always been a trade-off. Lower monthly checks, permanent reduction, but earlier access to income. That part hasn't changed. What has changed is the environment around early claiming. The rules are being enforced more tightly. That means decisions made today have more consequences later. Now let's talk about timing. Some people rush to claim at 62 because they're afraid benefits will be cut. That fear has been around for decades, but rushing without understanding the rules can create avoidable problems, especially if you plan to work, especially if your income is unpredictable, especially if your situation might change. Under the new enforcement approach, changes in income or work status are more likely to affect checks quickly, so planning matters more than speed. Now let's talk about people who plan to claim early and then stop working. For this group, the changes may have little effect. If income stays low and stable, enforcement doesn't come into play much. But for people who plan to mix work and benefits, the margin for error is smaller. Now let's talk about estimates again. When you claim early, Social Security asks how much you expect to earn. Many people guess. They underestimate. They forget about bonuses. They forget about side work. Under the March 2026 changes, underestimating income is more likely to trigger quick adjustments. That can result in withheld checks later in the year. Now let's talk about a common surprise. Some retirees take work just for a few months. They don't think it matters, but under the earnings rules, every dollar counts. Delayed reporting is what causes problems, not the work itself. And delayed reporting is what Social Security is cracking down on. Now let's talk about another group. People who are already over full retirement age. If you are past full retirement age, many of these changes barely affect you. There is no earnings limit. Work does not reduce benefits. Reporting requirements are simpler. That's why the focus is on retirees aged 62 to full retirement age. That's the sensitive window. Now let's talk about why Social Security is doing this now. It's not because retirees are doing something wrong. It's because the system is stretched. Overpayments cost money. Delayed corrections cost money. Stricter enforcement reduces administrative costs. That's the reality. Now let's talk about how this feels from the retiree's perspective. A check arrives smaller than expected, or a check is paused. No warning, no clear explanation at first. That's what people describe as a cut. But in most cases, it's temporary enforcement catching up to reported information. Now let's slow this down again. This is not a doomsday scenario. It's a procedural tightening. But procedural tightening still affects real people. And the people most affected are the ones who don't understand the rules. Now let's talk about how Social Security handles corrections and repayments, because this is one of the areas that will feel very different after March 2026. In the past, when Social Security discovered an overpayment, things moved slowly, sometimes very slowly. Months would pass. Even a full year could go by before anyone noticed. When a correction finally happened, it often came as a letter explaining what went wrong and how to repay the money. Repayment plans were common. Adjustments were spread out. That approach is changing. Starting in 2026, Social Security is trying to catch problems earlier. That means fewer large overpayments. But it also means quicker reactions. And quicker reactions feel harsher, even when the total amount involved is smaller. Now let's talk about what this looks like in real life. A retiree claims benefits at 62. They estimate their earnings for the year. Later, their income ends up higher than expected. Under the old system, Social Security might not catch that until the following year. Under the new system, income data arrives sooner. When the system sees a mismatch, benefits can be adjusted right away. Sometimes that means a reduced check. Sometimes that means a temporary pause. That pause feels alarming, but it's not permanent. It's the system correcting itself faster than before. Now let's talk about repayment specifically. If Social Security determines you were overpaid, repayment still works the same way. You are not required to pay everything back at once. Payment plans still exist. Waivers are still possible in certain situations. What's changing is the timing, not the rights. Now let's talk about communication. One of the biggest frustrations retirees report is not understanding why something changed. Letters arrive after checks change, not before. That order hasn't improved much yet. So, retirees may see a change in their deposit before they see an explanation. That's unsettling. But it doesn't mean something irreversible happened. Now, let's talk about how to reduce the chance of this happening. The most important thing is timely reporting. Reporting income changes as soon as they happen. Updating estimates when work changes. Not waiting until the end of the year. Under the new rules, delays matter more. Now let's talk about something else that causes confusion. Some retirees think that once Social Security withholds a check, that money is gone forever. That's not true. Withheld benefits due to earnings limits are recalculated later. Once you reach full retirement age, withheld benefits are credited back in the form of higher monthly payments. That rule has not changed. What's changed is how quickly withholding happens. Now let's talk about trust. Many retirees feel this tightening means Social Security doesn't trust them. That's not the intent. The system is reacting to data faster. That's all. The rules are the same. The enforcement is quicker. Now let's slow this down again. Nothing here means retirees need to panic, but it does mean that the days of "I'll fix it later" are fading. Accuracy up front matters more than ever. Now let's keep going, because there's another group affected by the March 2026 changes that hasn't gotten much attention yet, and that's people who rely on spousal and survivor benefits. Now let's talk about spousal and survivor benefits, because this is another area where the March 2026 rule changes quietly matter. Many people assume spousal and survivor benefits are simple. You qualify, you apply, and the amount is fixed. But in reality, these benefits depend heavily on timing, age, and reporting, and those are exactly the areas where enforcement is tightening. Now let's talk about spousal benefits first. If you claim spousal benefits before your full retirement age, those benefits are also subject to earnings limits. That rule has always existed. What changes in 2026 is how quickly Social Security responds when earnings go over the limit. For some people, spousal benefits are reduced or withheld faster than before. That feels sudden, but again, it's enforcement catching up sooner. Now let's talk about survivor benefits. Survivor benefits have their own age rules. Some people claim them early, some wait. Some switch between survivor benefits and retirement benefits later. All of that is still allowed. What's changing is the review process. Survivor benefit claims are being checked more carefully, especially when the survivor is under full retirement age, the survivor is working, or income changes during the year. If reporting is delayed, benefits can be adjusted more quickly than in the past. Now let's talk about switching strategies. Many retirees use a strategy where they claim one type of benefit and switch later. That's still legal, but it requires accurate reporting and careful timing. Under the new enforcement approach, mistakes are corrected sooner. That means less flexibility if information is wrong. Now let's talk about widows and widowers specifically. This group is often overwhelmed. They are dealing with loss. They are dealing with paperwork. They are making decisions under stress. The March 2026 changes don't remove benefits from widows and widowers, but they do reduce the grace period for errors. That's why understanding the rules matters. Not to scare anyone, but to reduce surprises. Now let's talk about remarriage. Remarriage affects survivor benefits differently depending on age. Those rules haven't changed, but enforcement has. Delayed reporting of remarriage is more likely to cause adjustments quickly. Now let's talk about communication again. Social Security does not always explain these changes well. People often hear about them after something happens. That's why rumors spread. That's why headlines sound extreme. Now let's slow this down again. Nothing about March 2026 eliminates spousal or survivor benefits. Nothing here targets widows. Nothing here removes eligibility. What's changing is how closely the system tracks conditions tied to those benefits. Now let's keep going, because there's another part of this story retirees need to understand. And it has to do with why the messaging sounds so alarming, even though the actual changes are technical. Just stay with me. A big reason these changes sound so alarming is the way information spreads. Social Security rarely makes loud announcements when it tightens internal rules. Instead, people notice changes only after something affects them personally. A check is smaller. A payment is delayed. A letter arrives unexpectedly. When that happens, people search for answers, and what they often find are exaggerated headlines. Words like cuts, crash, or ending spread faster than careful explanations. That doesn't mean retirees are wrong to be concerned. It means the explanation usually arrives after the fear. What's really happening is quieter than the headlines suggest. Social Security is not suddenly taking benefits away from retirees aged 62 and older. It's not rewriting the law in March 2026, and it's not targeting people simply because they claimed early. What it is doing is tightening how existing rules are applied. That tightening removes some of the cushion that used to exist. The cushion where mistakes were fixed later. The cushion where reporting delays didn't show up right away. The cushion where corrections happened slowly. As that cushion disappears, retirees feel the impact sooner, and sooner feels harsher, even when the total outcome is the same. This is why understanding the rules matters more than reacting to fear. When you know how earnings limits work, enforcement doesn't surprise you. When you know reporting matters, updates don't feel like punishment. When you know benefits withheld due to earnings are recalculated later, pauses don't feel permanent. For retirees over 62, especially those between 62 and full retirement age, the biggest protection is awareness. Knowing when income changes matter, knowing when to update estimates, knowing when to report work, knowing that a temporary adjustment is not the same as a permanent cut. March 2026 is not a cliff. It's not a deadline where benefits vanish. It's a point where the system becomes less forgiving of inattention. That's all. Retirees who understand this don't need to rush. They don't need to file early out of fear. They don't need to change benefits blindly. They just need to stay accurate, timely, and informed. And for most people, that's enough to avoid problems entirely. This isn't about panic. It's about precision. And precision is what keeps benefits stable as the system evolves. Thanks for taking the time to understand what's really changing and what isn't.